Hello and welcome to the British Sitcom History Podcast. You are listening to part 2 of our look at the other one, a relatively obscure sitcom from the 70s, the late 70s, and it was picked via listener poll. So this, don't blame us, the audience picked it. But no, we're enjoying it. It's a really interesting discussion. We're looking at Series 1, Episode 5, but it's a really interesting structure to this show going into the second series, which we've already talked a little bit about, but we're going to go into more. Richard Bryer's one of the stars here. We've already discussed his career in quite some depth. We've looked at Esmond and Larby, the writers. So if you've missed that, go back and listen to part 1, of course. Now we're jumping straight back into our episode discussion. We've still got Michael Gambon to deal with and, all the shenanigans that come in Series 2. So, without further delay, let's get back into it now.
So they're having a conversation here, and it emerges that they're going home tomorrow. And this is interesting what you were saying earlier about how there's an ongoing story here. We don't reset at the end of every episode. As a result of that, we get a lot of fleeting characters. There are a lot of people who are only in one episode. We see that in the second series as well, because he's a travelling salesman. So he's sort of a different location every week. What do you make of that? It's like there's no continuity of supporting characters.
Yeah, I think definitely the second series, it's a problem. I think in the first series, we have a much more definite situation. We're in this hotel. Yeah, there's not much recurring characters, but we're focused on these two. Whereas the second series, it is very much characters without a location. And that doesn't work as well for me. But this feels like we're in a very definite situation. We're in this hotel. We're in this Spanish holiday.
So at this point, Ralph, it emerges, I can't remember exactly how, but it emerges that Brian works for a record company. And that's quite funny, actually. He works in Moribund Records. So basically, when a record is not sold for like 5 years, he's the one who has to mark it for destruction. Everything I deal with is totally useless.
But it is great, you know. I looked up moribund in my dictionary. It said, moribund, adjective, meaning about to die or dying. So that's the classic thing here with Brian, that even in his job, he is dealing with just
he's about to die
things that are, of death.
Tending towards death.
Things that are just useless. Things that are boring and tedious and useless. And when we actually see him at work in a later episode, it is a very kind of literally there's an old man almost with cobwebs in his hair because he never moves. It's a very classic Victorian sort of office type thing.
When Brian says he works for a record company, Ralph's gobsmacked, as you would be, on the news that this boring man works for a record company.
Yeah.
But I was gobsmacked that they'd been on holiday together, sharing a room for 13 days, and not talked about what they do for a living yet. Yeah. And what I thought was, that's Ralph's arrogance. He's been there 13 days. He's not even found out the most basic information about his roommate. Yeah. And I sort of wrote that down. But then we find out what Ralph does. He's a rep. And so he'd not volunteered that information either. So Ralph's, because he's this fantasist, they've not talked in 2 weeks about anything real.
Perhaps this is the same thing. Ralph isn't quite acknowledging his own real life. He's on holiday and he's creating a sort of illusion of what he is in some ways as well. Which is why I was always expecting this whole thing that he wasn't what he was at all. Yeah. Which didn't come. So,
No. Then we have a little scene where it plays out that Ralph's encouraging Brian to do something impulsive. Take all those brochures that you've been planning everything. Just throw them in the fire. You don't need it. Let's just make this up as we go along. And so he throws his stuff in the fire. And of course, he's burnt his passport.
Because Brian's first attempt to do something completely wild and off the wall, he just stands up and starts singing.
The king, he said to me, you are a marvel. At singing, you really are a crack. And from his neck he took a diamond tie pin. He smiled at me and then he gave it back.
Is that it?
Yeah, so then, he encourages him to throw all his literature, because Brian loves his literature. It keeps him safe. He's got a briefcase full of little documents so that, because he thinks, or at least understands from himself, that he doesn't know anything. This world is alien to him, and so he wants to feel safe. He wants guidelines, and that's what the brochures give him. And Ralph is very much like, no, you don't want the guidelines. And like I say, this is the entire conflict of the show. But
it is.
But it is good for Brian to kind of let go of some of that. But he obviously it goes a step too far. He accidentally burns his passport.
I don't. You see, here's a really interesting point of conversation. If Brian is autistic, it's not good for him at all. Not have that framework would just create a sense of panic in him, and he would not enjoy his holiday.
Yeah.
So it's good for someone like you and me to say, "Oh yeah, let go of the guardrails and enjoy yourself." But actually, if letting go of the guardrails means that you're in a just blind state of panic for the rest of your holiday, that's not good. That's not helpful.
Well, I think the good thing about the whole thing is that what he's found in Ralph is he's the guardrails, right? Ralph is his guidelines. But because he feels safe with Ralph, he believes that Ralph understands what he's doing, can make one phone call and make something happen, and so he feels safe and secure there. But he's also getting the kind of more varied experience.
Yeah, okay.
So
all right.
It only works because he believes in Ralph.
So we cut to the next scene. We're in the hotel bar, and Brian is upset. Brian's literally crying. He's upset because he's burnt his passport. He thinks he's going to be put in prison and never be able to go home.
And can I say as well, what Michael Gambon is doing in this whole fretting scene it's pretty much a Stan Laurel impression. I don't know if that's what he's consciously doing, but it just really...
I didn't notice that.
It just looked like someone doing a Stan Laurel impression who isn't doing a very good Stan Laurel impression, but really like the crying and he almost like starts tufting his hair up. It's
I'm going to go back and have another look at that.
But yeah, he's doing classic comedy whimpering, and he's very, very scared. Like you just said, he is
genuinely scared
because as far as he's concerned, he's a man without a country. That passport is what gets him in and out of the country, and now he's trapped.
Yeah. How this plays out is Ralph's all blasé about it. Oh, don't worry, old man, it'll be fine. And he goes and talks to Sue, the rep. And Sue is about to leave through plot contrivance. She's about to leave the hotel for the night. So Ralph, sort of hypothetically, if someone were to lose their passport, what might you do about that? And she tells him what the procedure is. You go to the consulate, etc. Then Sue's gone. Ralph comes back into the bar, pretends to make a phone call. He's got his finger on the phone receiver thing, so he's not actually making a call, but he's giving it a big old blag, and then gives Brian the information that he's just got from Sue. So this is really interesting because what he's doing is he's making himself look good. Like, that is his blag here. But he has solved the problem.
I think this is a great summation of the character in general because, he's going to make it look like it was all his idea. And there's, ultimately it's the same end point. So what does it matter? He's just a bit of a smug twat.
Yes.
But then he goes back into the room. It doesn't just go, hey, Brian, look, I've thought of what we should do. We'll go to the consulate and get you some temporary papers. He, first of all, says, Brian, hey, you know what you should do? Talk to Sue, because she'll know what to do in this situation. Knowing that Sue has left, Brian then has to go, find out Sue has left, come back in even more panic. Oh my God, the one answer I had has now failed me. So that Ralph can put Sue down, because I think he's still a bit smarting over the whole Buffett thing. Yeah, because he wants to say, look, we gave Sue a chance, she's let us down, she's not here when we...
Yeah, she didn't know. She just went off. She's gone off to Madrid for the night.
And then he doesn't just say, look, I know what to do, I've got experience, He makes it look like, hey, not anyone could just make this happen. I can make this happen. If you were talking to one of the other holiday makers and they said, oh, just go to the consulate, that's not enough. I know a lawyer, and I've got this is going to happen. Yeah, he's ultimately getting the problem solved, but he's doing it in a way that makes himself look great. And
he's doing it in a self-aggrandizing way. Yeah. Because that's his main priority, is to make himself look good. And we don't like that. But ultimately, he has fixed his friend's problem.
Incidentally, can I just say as well, when he goes, don't worry, I know what to do, and he walks over the phone to make his phone call, and he goes, phonio, phonio, phonio. And I don't know why that made me laugh so much.
What about when they have a sombrero del noche? Yeah. What's that? It's a nightcap, dear boy, nightcap.
I don't know how much of that is just sort of Richard Breyer's sort of performance. I'm sure it's all in the script. He's not like known as an ad-lib or anything. Good. But he just like bringing a lot of character to this thing, and it really does.
I mean, it's worth mentioning that while this is all happening, there's the barman. Well, not the barman. The staff of the hotel hate Ralph. They hate him. Yeah, like universally, and you can feel like they make no play of hiding their contempt for him.
Yeah. By the way, that waiter who's in several episodes, played by an actor called Michael Chesden, a beautiful Spanish name.
Beautiful Spanish name.
Now, I don't know what Michael Chesnon's background is, but you look at his IMDb, every character is like Mediterraneans of some kind. It's like French waiter, Greek official.
He is what they used to call swarthy.
Yeah, exactly. But he's probably from like Newcastle or something.
Shall we talk about Sue? We've mentioned Sue a few times, the sales rep. Mm-hmm. So, first of all, I recognised Sue. I recognised the actor. She's John Alderton's girlfriend in Please Sir, isn't she?
That's right. She plays Penny in Please Sir.
What's her name?
Jill Kerman is her name.
Jill Kerman. Was she in anything else? Obviously, I recognised her from that, but I don't know her other than that.
Obviously, she's done a fair bit of work, but yeah, not that I would kind of go, oh, you'll know her from this. It's Please Sir was like the big thing, and then this is, 10 years later?
Well, she's definitely the third name on the cast list on this. She's in every episode, well, the first 5 episodes of the first series, although that's it. Once they go home, she's never in it again. Yeah,
again, it's like one of the members of staff who sees right through Ralph, but she's the one who has the authority to sort of tell him to shove it occasionally. And we see that quite a bit, but we have a scene now where it really kind of comes to a head. But we see it quite a bit with her character because of Ralph's innate misogyny.
Yes.
And she, being a woman, obviously, bears the brunt of this.
A woman?
Very simple terms of him calling her dear and kind of sort of talking down to her in a very sort of classic way, but also just being very sort of creepily flirtatious. Can't quite understand why she wouldn't want to go out with him.
In this episode where she has a real go at him in a minute, and one of the things that she says is, all the single women here have asked me to keep you away from them. And we have seen him trying to chat people up, and it's not pretty. And he is exactly the sort of thing you would be like, oh, don't get caught in a room with him, don't get stuck in a lift with him, There's a lot of that about him.
Yeah, and we have seen an example of where it actually works, and this young woman takes a real interest in him. He seems as surprised as anyone else. So, I'm not sure his batting average is that strong, really. But yeah, this is a fairly rare example of where Ralph is actually called out. Sue comes back unexpectedly and basically discovers all the stuff we've just talked about, that Brian was in trouble, Ralph sorted it out, but actually he did it in this way that was very self-aggrandizing. And so she's sick of it, and she's sick of Ralph, and she wants Brian to know the truth.
And she unloads on Ralph when Brian's out of the room, and then she says, I'm going to tell him. And I thought to myself, this is not the massive reveal that you think it is. Like, she doesn't tell him. But if she did, what's she going to say? Oh, I gave Ralph that advice. And like, all right. He can just pivot into another lie.
I mean, in this particular case with Brian, he'd just talk his way out of it. But it is very much just like, I'm going to call you out on your bullshit. You are a bullshitter, and I'm going to shout it out.
I don't know. Just the jeopardy didn't seem that high to me.
And I've always
You creep.
Now look, Miss Bainbridge.
There was nobody about because I'd gone to Madrid. You just have to be the big noise, don't you?
Well, don't we all?
No, we don't.
Well, all right, a harmless deception. It's not really that important, is it?
Yes, particularly when it's the last in a long line of.
But Ralph is worried. He's sort of stuttering and jabbering. He's trying to talk her out of it. He's trying to smooth talk her out of it.
There's an interesting moment of self-awareness there when he's sort of pleading. So he, like you say, he tries to bravado his way out of it, and then he's pleading, and he says, this always happens to me. I always get left on the outside. I just want a friend. And there's a moment where the guard completely drops. It's fleeting. But we definitely see that for a moment as he's just desperately casting around to not be called out.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we see a lot more of that in Series 2 as that develops, I think. But here, it's quite a rare, fleeting thing, as you say.
And of course, Sue doesn't do the big reveal. But that's not because she feels sorry for Ralph. It's because Brian comes back and he's says, oh, this is the best 2 weeks of my life. It's been great to spend this time with Ralph. And she doesn't want to spoil that for him. So she does the right thing. Ralph gets away with it.
But Brian literally says, this has been the best 2 weeks of my life.
But it's true.
And it's true.
Yeah.
Because he has such a
So
tedious life.
this bullshitter that she doesn't like or respect has been such a great friend to him that he's had the best 2 weeks of his life.
Yeah.
So, go figure.
Now, just as they walk out here, I want to ask you about this as a 70s reference. Brian says to Sue, oh, by the way, do you know the Spanish for lavender water? Now, I thought,
I didn't get that.
What does that mean? Well, I looked up lavender water, and it's apparently a good skin moisturizer. So I was thinking, is that a 70s treatment for sunburn? Is that Is that
Oh,
what
it
you would
might be.
have? I don't know. It was just a
I don't
throwaway
know.
line. I don't know. It was a very 70s thing.
Well, maybe our listeners can enlighten us when this goes out
Someone with the
on
older
our
generation.
socials. What's lavender water? One other thing that was mentioned in this bar scene, which has been mentioned before, is the champagne they're drinking is the dry Libyan champagne.
Yes.
That really made me laugh. That made me laugh every time. Oh, the dry Libyan. And that's it. That's the end of the holiday. So the next, we now cut to the sort of VT of a plane landing.
Yeah, some really old-looking footage of a plane, like scratched film footage.
Yeah, you're right.
Real proper stock footage, that.
Then the next scene, we're in the airport. I guess it's like a coffee shop or a restaurant or a cafe or something in the airport, which is sort of where we first encountered them in the first episode.
Yeah.
Although I did think to myself, who goes for a coffee in the airport after they've landed at home? I don't think that's a thing. But never mind.
Maybe
it's
the
for
idea
drama,
is
I
they
get
know
it.
they're going their separate ways, so one last drink,
So Brian's obviously a bit nervous. He reports his route home. He says, I'll be going on this line and then on the A64 and, all that classic stuff. And Brian gives Ralph a piece of paper with his address on it. And what does Ralph do?
He screws it up and throws it in the bin. Because
I'm a lone wolf,
he is
old
a
man.
lone wolf, yeah. In a very smug
Yeah.
way, kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's a sort of sad moment
It's
because
a really sad moment, that.
Brian is genuinely sad that that's the case, but also kind of accepts it. He understands that
Yeah, he
the
says,
whole time
we've had a
Ralph's
great
still
2
alone.
weeks. Let's leave it at that. It's been wonderful, but that's it. Chapter's closed.
Yeah.
And then Brian leaves, and Ralph, because he was bluffing, jumps up, runs over to the bin to get this piece of paper out. But the bin has been emptied while the conversation was happening. We cut to Ralph digging through lots of paper in some sort of big bin or something. I don't know. That's the punchline of the episode, and credits roll.
Which is interesting because, first of all, I don't know if we've ever seen Ralph that exposed and very obviously suddenly,
Yeah.
like, we see the other side. We've seen occasional flashes of it, but like we say, it's rare that he's so self-conscious of his own bullshit. He didn't casually go, oh, well, you know what, I'm going to take that piece of paper after all. He scurried to
That was
it
his
at
plan.
the first moment, yeah. And
Oh, yeah.
when it
He
wasn't
threw it away
there,
knowing he was going to go back for it.
and when it wasn't there, he panicked. He was like, that's an important address I've got on there. And a great ending. We sort of expose him for what he is. It's this kind of big punchline that rounds everything off. That is the end of the series, at the end of the show.
Except the next 2 episodes.
Apart from the next 2 episodes, yeah. Now, if we'd gone from that into, okay, we've decided it went well enough, we're doing a second series, so we're going to reinvent it slightly. How can we do that? Ralph finds a way to find Brian, and then they end up working on the road together.
Yeah.
Okay. But that was obviously the plan from the very beginning, or at least
Yeah, because
at
that's
some
next
point.
week's episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't know. Perhaps this was written as a series, and then someone went, well, what happens next series? Like, what if people like it? What do we do next? They're on holiday again? That's stupid. What's that? And then someone wrote duty free. But then
Well, I wondered that. I mean, without let's divulge the way we watched this. You had the DVD for the first series, and
Yeah.
when we started watching, we didn't have the second series, so I thought we were going to have to kind of apologetically say to our listeners, look, we're only going to talk about series 1 here. In the end, we got series 2, but that's not the point. The point is that after watching the first series, I thought, well, I'm never going to see series 2, but they'd probably just go on holiday again, I guess.
Yeah.
No.
And, series. I'm glad we found series 2 because I did
Yeah.
enough research to think there's a significant difference here. I need to find it. This isn't just more of the same, So, series 1 was brought out on DVD several years ago and obviously didn't sell well enough for them to do series 2. So, it's this slightly, awkward middle ground of where some of it's available. And
How
others
did you
not.
find it, just to let our listeners know how the magic happens?
Hey, do you know what? It wasn't easy, actually. I only found one place that had it. I mean, the recordings we got are recorded off of gold from, like, the 90s, a repeat in the 90s or something. It's a VHS rip, which, is significant, Gareth, because those gold repeats were half hour with an advert, and this is a BBC show that was a half hour. So there have been some cuts, definitely. I don't know what. And watching it, there doesn't feel anything that obvious where like, ooh, that was a weird cut. But they must have taken a few minutes out of them. But yeah, they are out there. I found them through a specific or an American-based website that could send them to me. But they weren't easy to find. They're certainly not just like knocking about on YouTube or something like that in low quality, which often you will find if you just kind of get a quick glance at something. if anyone's really struggling, I've got them. Give me an email. I'll send some to you. But, you know.
Yeah, try and recoup some money.
Yeah, I had to pay top dollar for this, for these.
Well, let's run through, if I could quickly run through Series 2. So, well, actually, we start with Episode 6 of Series 1. So yes, through a contrivance, they find each other again. It turns out that Ralph really is a sales rep. He does, that he's not making that up. We see that meeting that I mentioned earlier in the podcast where he wins an award for best salesperson. So we know he's good at his job, but all the other salespeople hate him. They're avoiding his eye. They're planning a night out and they send him to the wrong place. So we are getting a broader picture of Ralph's life. And I can't remember exactly how it's contrived because it doesn't really matter.
Well,
but basically,
it's not that contrived because Ralph goes well out of his way to find Brian. He knows his name and a kind of an idea of where he lives, and he works at a record company.
Yeah.
So using that information, he manages to track him down.
he does a lot of work on it.
And he's got his receptionist and his assistant working at it, and it's definitely, it's not that contrived. It's very much him going to a great deal of effort to find him.
Yeah,
he makes it look like it's contrived. He wanders into Brian's office and goes, "Oh, hello, I was just walking through. What's happening?" So,
yeah. And Brian, of course, is credulous enough to believe that.
Yeah.
By hook or by crook, Ralph persuades Brian to quit his safe, boring job and come and work with him as a rep. Even though, let's all be honest about this, Brian has got absolutely no skills to be a sales rep.
No, really none at all. Ralph really seduces Brian. He takes him to see the cricket at Lord's, and they've got, the box at Lord's or whatever it is.
Oh, there's an appearance by Brian Close, isn't there? Captain Brian Close.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know who that was. I understood that it was a famous cricketer of the time, but I was like, that's totally out of my reference.
Do you know what, Alan? I was just about to say then, well, that'd be like today if it was... I have no idea who the England cricket captain is. Not a clue. I was going to say Andrew Flintoff. Is that 15 years ago?
Yeah, that's a bit old, yeah. But yeah, but he really seduces him. And it's like Ralph has found this person who's completely impressed by what he does. And so he has to up himself every time. He can't just take him out for a fancy meal. Or he's taking him... And he's using all his connections. Ralph is this salesman, so someone said, "Oh, I've got some free tickets for you." It's like it's all part of the corporate life.
Well, but again, we've talked about this so many times. It's not all bullshit. This is the truth.
Yeah.
Like, if you come and be a sales rep, you'll get people bribing you with tickets.
Yeah.
Like that is part of that life. It's not bullshit.
And so he's trying to get Brian to join this life, and Brian goes, No, I recognise what I am and where I should be, and it's in a crappy little office. But then he goes back to the office and basically, has this breakthrough moment and actually, shove your job. And this very brave moment for Brian. And of course it all falls apart because then he can't find Ralph again. So then there's a bit of back and forth. Like I say, there's these two bridging episodes to take us from, they meet in holiday to they are now established as working reps together.
They're sales reps on the road. Can I run through the episodes of Series 2?
Yes.
So we don't want to go into too much detail because people won't have seen them unless they're as obsessive as you. So they're now sales reps on the road. So in episode 1, Ralph is role modeling and Brian's trying to learn how to sell, and he's crap, obviously. Episode 2, we have this weird thing where we go back to the village where Ralph was evacuated during the war, and they all hate him because they think he's responsible for the death of one of the local kids. Yeah. It's such a weird, convoluted story. And
when it's revealed, there's this whole thing he's done something, he's done something, and then it's revealed, it's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Even if that's what they thought he'd done, which he hasn't, it still wouldn't translate to this hatred. It didn't make any sense.
Wanting to kill him.
Yeah.
So really, really weird. As a standalone drama, you could sort of see that being a thing, but I don't know. That episode just totally jarred. It didn't fit with the nature of the what I'd watched before. Episode 3, we're back on the road. He's in a B&B. And they go to a strip club. Quite a lot of adult content in the other one, actually. But that's by the by. Episode 4, they're on the run from some bikers that Ralph has said something upsetting to, and there's some pub brawls and things.
A very silly episode that feels like filler.
Very farcical, yeah. In episode 5, this is the weirdest one of all. Basically, Brian gets some. So they go and see this female managing director.
Well, she's the buyer for the company, so that's all the sales reps have to deal with her.
All the sales reps have to deal with her. So obviously Ralph goes in there with all his misogyny on show, and she hates it.
Can we just talk about this episode in a little more detail? Because I think it says a lot
All right.
about Ralph's character and the misogyny that is on show here. So this is in the 70s, obviously, and Ralph is a kind of big I am. And we see it mostly with Sue in the first series. You know, he's very belittling to women and just trying to get off with them all the time. So then we have this example of it's a female buyer. And so Ralph is like, don't worry about Brian. Don't worry about this because I know exactly how to deal with the ladies. And it's just exactly what you would think a 70s creepy sales rep would be.
You were a model, weren't you?
No.
No, how extraordinary.
Now, the thing is this, as you know, our company is in the market for new packaging.
I've seen you on the cover of something.
New packaging for our entire range of food products.
Okay, so little Miss Modest doesn't want to talk about it.
Food products ranging from accelerated freeze-dried vegetables to...
I'll only say this. The packaging world's gain is David Bailey's loss.
to ready-jointed single-meal vacuum packs.
That's a rarity, isn't it? A beautiful head like hers with a brain inside it.
In fairness, he is like being portrayed as creepy. Even in 1979, we were supposed to think, "Oh, this is creepy."
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. And the whole point of the episode really is that, and this female buyer, she's sick of all the reps are all doing the same thing, and she's sick of it. So when Brian turns up,
all I want is someone to tell me about the products.
Yeah, and all Brian knows is like he's got the literature and he's been memorizing everything about the products because that's what he does, and that's why he would be useful in some scenarios. He's not a salesman. Yeah. But he would be useful to have around. But yeah, so he turns up and actually just says, oh, well, you could buy these many for this amount. So she's great. She's like, finally someone I can deal with. But then through some sort of
and therefore has sex with him.
Some weird 70s self-conscious womanness. She decides to have sex with him just to prove that she can if she wanted to. Because she spends her whole time batting off affections. She has to kind of prove to herself that she can get it if she wants
to. So basically Brian's negged her, hasn't he? That's what he's done.
Accidentally.
He's unwittingly negged her.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like he's that up for it. He just sort of feels like he's doing it to get the sale.
Yeah, fair enough. He makes the sale. Good luck to him. You do what you got to do. So the final episode, we sort of finally get a sort of reveal of Ralph's family, Ralph's home life. So he still lives with his mum and dad, and this is why he wants to be out on the road constantly. His mum and dad, incidentally, what casting? His dad is played by Max Wall, and his mum is played by Gretchen Frankel. Yeah. I mean, what incredible casting.
Well, this is what we call the Kirk St. Moritz twist, where it turns out he's a sad loser all along. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't play. I mean, it doesn't work that well in Dear John, to be honest. But here, all we've done throughout the whole thing is establish that Ralph is this guy. Is this character, and he's this cocky salesman. The fact that he lives, when he's not on the road, he lives with his parents, and that they are totally overbearing, and he is completely cowed by them. He just doesn't fit. Like, that's not what that character would be.
I agree.
And again, in our whole kind of fake it till you make it, what is Ralph actually? Well, he's made it. He's whatever he is, he's doing it. Why wouldn't he just move away and have a flat? And I don't know. And perhaps if you had more time to delve into that, you could make it work. But and there's just this very stupid cartoony caricature family that he's got. Just to try and really to hammer. We've got 10 minutes to make this work. Let's hammer it home.
So these are Ralph's lodgings, then, are they?
Lodgings? This is his home. We're his family.
Oh, I see.
Well, that's me fixed up. You come to Canvey Island with us, darling?
Well, no, because I'm actually mainly here at the moment.
Oh.
Here. You don't want to turn that up. That's next door Noreen. She's a real goer.
Yeah, I didn't really enjoy that episode. We were supposed to see, this is the true Ralph, and this is what makes him what he is. I knew what they were trying to do, but it didn't really work for me.
It feels like someone finding an ending rather than an ending coming to us.
Yes.
And the whole series 2 is weird. It's so different to series 1. That like I said, it feels more like a sequel spin-off rather than a
totally different
series.
In tone, not just in the setting, but the tone is different. Like I said, that episode with the evacuee when he goes back to his evacuee village, that's like That's like a completely different sitcom.
And it feels more slapdash, and I think it might just be because you are actually bringing in more supporting characters, different every time. And that means you've got an actor who turns up and they're just like, here's your lines, do it. And, some people do that better than others. There's a nice bit where he's talking to the woman who runs the B&B and she's sort of very maternal to him.
Yeah.
And it means he can open up slightly. That's a nice little moment, but it feels like Series 2 we're desperate to kind of reveal Ralph. And like that's what we're doing the whole time. And that's not what Series 1 is about. And it feels like if you want to keep this going, then you need those glimpses, but not the reveal.
Do you know what the difference is? It doesn't have a situation.
Yeah.
They don't have to be in Spain. They could be somewhere else, but there's no consistency between the episodes of Series 2.
Even if they were based in the office and it's the same secretary all the time, it's like...
It's not just that they're in different locations. That's not really what I mean by situation. Just the dynamics change and there's so many different supporting characters coming in and out. It just doesn't connect together. It doesn't hang together.
It feels like you've got, here are the characters, and you've given it to 6 writers and said, like, write an episode.
It does feel like that. You're absolutely right. Yeah, that's a good call. I mentioned there's quite a lot of adult content. So, like we said, Brian, has sex with somebody. We don't see that happening. It's not like full frontal nudity or anything. But, it is more than alluded to. They go to a strip club in that second series as well. Yeah. We see a stripper on stage, and in the first series, like you mentioned there, Ralph almost goes to bed with a holidaymaker, but it doesn't quite work out for him. But yeah, quite adult content. It was. I guess this is not an early evening sitcom.
It's that 70s thing of just kind of flirting with those ideas without really kind of doing it in any big way. We said a similar thing about Chance in a Million. Well, there's a bit of like people in their pants and stuff like that, but
a lot of Brenda Blethyn in her pants.
Yeah. It's that 70s vibe again. All I think of when I do this is Abigail's Party, which I guess is my go-to 70s middle-class sitcom-y thing. Just one thing to note as well, I spotted the first series at least, it's produced and directed by John Howard Davis, well established at that point, and he did Fawlty Towers, for example, and he was a controller comedy of the BBC for a long time. But credited here as film direction, which I guess is everything that was shot location-wise and not the studio stuff, is Gareth Gwenlyn.
Oh,
now Gareth Gwenlyn became comedy royalty in his own right behind the scenes, but at this point, very early on in his career, his first sort of big directorial credit is Reginald Perrin, which came the year later. So I think this was where he was cutting his teeth as a director.
Yeah,
and he's credited as film direction now. I don't know if you remember when we talked about Susan Belbin in One Foot in the Grave, her coming up as a director. We found out that she did, on Are You Being Served, which was directed by David Croft, he would say to her, like she was the production manager or whatever, and he would say to her, oh, you direct the canteen scenes and I'll do the rest. Like he was basically giving her experience and a chance.
Yeah.
But she's uncredited. And I wonder if there's something like this going on here. Gareth Gwenlyn is getting credited as the film direction. But I wonder if he was a bit more hands-on.
I was just going to say that. There wasn't a lot of film, was there?
No, but maybe it was just like, hey, you go out and shoot that. But maybe John Howard Davis was like, hey, you direct this.
That's what I mean. I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying maybe he had more of a role than just doing a few seconds of out.
Possibly. I mean, that's complete speculation on my part. But, that it does feel like that's how it worked. The older hand.
He did a good job on the airplane landing. Do you know what we haven't talked about? We haven't really talked about Michael Gambon. Shall we go back and discuss his career?
I think that's a good idea, yes. Because
Harry Potter actor Michael Gambon.
Well, I think it's easy to forget because Michael Gambon is not someone we associate with sitcom, or not someone I
not
associate
at all.
with sitcom.
This is the only sitcom I certainly... Well, if you'd have asked me 3 months ago, I would have said he's never been in a sitcom. Yeah, so brief history. He's Michael Gambon was Irish, actually. He's born in Dublin, but moved to London as a child. Because his father was worked in construction, I think, and came to London because there was a lot of work going on after the war. So pretty classic, Irish migration kind of story. Trained as an engineer, and if you've ever seen any interviews with Michael Gambon, he's always talking about he loves watches and like watchmaking tools and stuff like that. He's like got this real kind of weird mechanical engineers. Interesting.
Like in a very sort of
I didn't know that.
Would you like to talk about my watchmaking sets kind of way? But then I read this thing that he got into theatre by approaching a theatre that was based in Ireland and sending them a CV that was just totally fake. Yeah, I was doing all this stuff in England.
Okay.
And they gave him a job. I don't know. It wasn't quite confirmed enough for me to kind of really rely on it, but that seems like that's how he got his start in theatre.
Fair play.
But he ended up becoming one of the original members of the National Theatre when that was established in the 60s, run by Laurence Olivier.
Wait a sec. I don't know how many notes you've got on this, but I've never given this a moment of thought before. I just assumed the National Theatre was centuries old. The 1960s?
Yeah, it was sort of... The idea was buzzing around for a while, and it was actually during the Festival of Britain in the 50s where they revamped the South Bank. That was they were going to put something there. It never happened, but then eventually it did. It just took longer than expected. But that's why that the National Theatre base on the South Bank is that 1960s brutalist building. And before that was built, they were based in the Old Vic. But then they got their own home at the National Theatre, which is where it still is now.
Right.
And it was run by Laurence Olivier. And Laurence Olivier, being the big, high-profile face he was instrumental in getting the whole thing started and getting funding. And that's why there's a statue of him outside the National Theatre.
Indeed. Okay.
Well, yeah, Michael Gambon was one of the original members of that. He was, one of the founders in that theatre. So that was his...
When was he born then? How old is he?
1940 he was born, so he would have been pretty young.
Gosh, right, okay, yeah. Fair enough.
And then after that, he went into rep after that because he just sort of obviously just wanted to gain more experience and kind of, that's the way you did it. Just play 24 different roles in a year. Started to do a bit of TV... but not really comedy specialist by any means. He did a lot of Alan Ayckbourn plays, and that was a bit more show off your comedy chops. Did do comedy, seemed to do it very well, but it was not what he was kind of renowned for. And then, we saw how he became much more of a well-established as a serious actor.
He was in The Singing Detective, wasn't he?
That was definitely one of the breakthrough things for him, yeah.
Yeah, which was it was a Dennis Potter show, but it was culturally huge, big audiences, but everyone was talking about it. I think it was a bit blue. There was a bit of naughtiness in it. Dennis Potter was filth.
But just to talk of his comedy stuff, what I could think of, apparently towards the end of his life, he was supposed to be in a show called Breeders. Martin Freeman show. This is only a few years ago.
I remember Breeders. Yeah. Was he supposed to play the dad?
I assume so. It's Alan Armstrong plays it, isn't it? I assume it was that role.
Alan Armstrong, thank you, yes.
And he was lined up to do it, but was struggling to remember lines. And at some point years before that, had given up theatre because his memory wasn't there anymore. And, he was only a few years before he died. He would have been 80. So, fair enough. Yeah. But that was the only other sort of proper sitcom thing I could find. But here's a couple of comedy film things. First of all, of course, he is, very notably... in the Ali G in the House film.
Okay.
He plays the Prime Minister.
I haven't seen it, Alan.
He plays the Prime Minister. Yeah, he's the Prime Minister and Charles Dance's... he's like the Foreign Secretary or something. But yeah, obviously very over-the-top silly comedy role. And of course Martin Freeman is in that as well. Maybe that's how they measure it. And then a 2003 film called The Actors, which is Dylan Moran and Michael Caine. Yeah. And... Michael Gambon is the bad guy in that. He's like a gangster, but in a very kind of comedy way. And then, of course, there's things off the top of my head that I could think of him, very in tune with British comedy. But then there is a very specific sitcom film that he is in, because in 2016 they did the Dad's Army reboot, and he was Godfrey.
Okay, I didn't know that.
He was the old man in Dad's Army.
I've never seen the Dad's Army reboot. That's really interesting.
Oh, yes. And did it very well, by the way. Yeah.
Was there never any talk of getting Ian Lavender for that role? No, I'm serious. That would have been lovely.
He is in it.
You play Hamlet on the way up and what's his dad, Claudius, on the way down. Have I got that right?
Yeah.
You're the Shakespearean.
Yeah, maybe Ian Lavender's acting ability was judged accordingly, and he didn't get the part. Gave it to Michael Gambon. I think Ian Lavender is in it, but it's okay, look, let's give you a cameo. That's what you're here for.
But we've got Michael Gambon for crying out loud. Well, I'll tell you what we haven't talked about. We always talk about the opening titles. I tell you what, the music on this. Do you remember when we covered Dear John and we were like, this is the bleakest thing I've ever heard? This is right up there. It's this sort of plaintive, like the incidental music when Bambi finds his mum. It's wrist-openingly sad music. It doesn't seem appropriate for a sitcom.
It doesn't, does it? I automatically contrasted it with Duty Free, which is this very upbeat Spanish kind of thing. Yeah,
which is what you'd expect, especially the first series. It's all about them being on holiday. You'd expect something with a bit of a, something you could shake your castanets to.
Yeah, I don't get it. It's Ronnie Hazelhurst. It's so he knows what he's doing. It's standard BBC fare. But I don't know. It doesn't
with
fit
the titles.
the tone.
The music is playing. The music is playing over. We get 3 still images.
Right.
And the first still image is Richard Briers, and it's got his name. The second is Michael Gambon, and the third is In the Other One. And the still images it's like a collection of objects which sum up that character. So I've written this down.
Okay.
So the first one, which is Richard Briers' character, we have a still image of it. There's a very 1970s looking cocktail. There's a cigarillo in an earthenware ashtray. There's a lighter. There's some sunglasses and some sort of cravat, I think.
A silk scarf.
It's an image. It's a collection of objects that you can actually smell in the video. It's that Nigel Farage thing again. That cigarillo and the cocktail. It's just like, oh, God. I feel a bit... I can feel my arteries tightening just looking. Then we cut to the second image, which is Michael Gambon. And we've got lots of brochures scattered around. One of those wallets that you used to have to sort of keep your passport and your traveller's checks in. And a load of postcards, which we learned he's been sending a postcard back to his elderly neighbour. Every day he's been writing a postcard. So there's a load of postcards there. Oh, and there's a glass of beer, because even nerds get pissed in the 1970s.
Yeah. Whenever he goes to the bar, the barman just hands him a specific drink, which I think is a
bottle of beer.
Yeah. Like he just knows that's his order now.
Yeah, unless he has one of the Libyan dry champagnes. Do you remember traveller's checks?
Yes, I'm just old enough to know what they were, rather than having used them, particularly as an adult, but as a child. I'm going to do this is some Peter Kay material.
Who remembers traveller's checks? I can remember the first holiday I ever went on without my mum and dad.
Yeah.
I had traveller's checks, so that was the only time I've ever used them. But I think the idea was it was like cash, but it had a serial number, so if you lost it, you could get it back. That sort of thing.
Yeah, if it got nicked.
So then the third image to say the other one is just a contrasting suitcases. So we have a sort of battered brown suitcase which looks very old fashioned. I said I thought that looks like Paddington Bear's suitcase, but I don't actually know because I've never seen Paddington. But that's what it made me think of.
Yeah,
and then you've got this sort of Air India satchel hold-all, which is Ralph's bag, which we actually see in the first episode. It's just a beautiful contrast of their two approaches to travelling. Oh, and incidentally, both bags have got this. They've got a luggage tag on them. Did you notice that? The luggage tag is it's like a picture of an orange. but I was like, well, why is that an orange? It took me a minute because oranges are grown in Spain. You see.
Yeah.
Now, so here's a question: in 1977, when that was made, would you associate oranges with Spain and exoticism? Because I don't. If I eat an orange, I don't think, I wonder which exotic part of the world this has come from. But maybe in 1977 you would have.
Did we have oranges in the 70s?
We had oranges,
yeah.
But I think that they were like, oh, these are foreign, these are imported, as opposed to apples or whatever,
Maybe,
But I don't know. I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah, I don't know. Old people, please tell us what were the 70s like.
Yeah.
Didn't see a banana till I was 17. And did you notice as well that the opening credits change, the visuals change, because of course the situation changes. There's no point having those credits when you're not in Spain.
Oh, I didn't notice for the second series. So what were the
not just for second series, for episode 6. Because and so it's like some documents in a briefcase and a suit hanging up.
Because he's a sales rep.
It's life on the road kind of imagery. Yeah, it's the same principle, but to do that mid-series. Again, it's very odd. You're honestly,
really suspicious, aren't you?
There's something going on here. Like, was this written as one series and then they decided that, I don't know. There's something's gone on. I want to know what it was.
I don't think we'll ever know.
So yeah, the other one, it's a bit of a weird one, and I guess what we haven't really talked about much, Gareth, is did you laugh ever at watching this? Did you laugh at any point?
That's a fair question. I will say that I'm avoiding your question. I'm not sure the answer is yes, but I enjoyed it. It was interesting. The word I used to you when I messaged you about it after I'd finished was, that was really interesting, and it was. That's not a euphemism for crap. I was interested, and I wanted to keep watching it. It wasn't that funny, no.
No.
I'm not even going to say it was that good. It wasn't terrible, but it was interesting. I was curious.
Well, I think, I have kept associating this with the likes of Abigail's Party or an Alan Ayckbourn play. I think this feels like very light,
got some of that about it.
touch drama rather than comedy. It's not particularly funny. It's just very light. That's all right. That's fine. I think Esmond and Larby in general are quite light touch with their comedy. And that's okay. Like you said, I enjoyed watching it. The first series definitely more than the second, where it kind of loses its way. I feel it gets a bit more caricature-y with the supporting characters and, all that. It had a situation and then it ended and then it lost its way. But yeah, it was fine. But I didn't get a lot of big laughs out of it. And more of those were just out of quirky character things rather than gags.
Well, I'd like to thank our listeners for voting for it because, as I said, I'd never heard of it 3 months ago, and it's been really interesting to find something new. And I enjoyed it. I will go that far.
Oh, I just want to mention one other thing as well. Something that was the bane of my existence when trying to find Series 2 of the other one online somewhere, is that there is a sitcom called The Other One, which came out about 5 years ago, starring Ellie White.
I know Ellie
You'd
White,
know her name. She's been in all sorts of stuff. You'd know her face. And created by Holly Walsh. She's a stand-up, right? So I haven't seen that. If you've tuned into this episode, I'm sorry if that's what you're expecting. But
well done for hanging around for 2 hours.
You've probably figured it out by now. But yeah, that was if you're trying to find The Other One episodes online, that's what you're going to find.
That's all you're going to get. Yeah. We should probably put 1977 in brackets when we put this episode out. Well, what are we doing next week? It's our last episode of the series next time, so what are we going to be looking at?
As always, when we come to the end of a series, we like to go for something a little bit more modern. And this series, we're going for the most up-to-date thing we've ever done. It has officially finished. It just did its last Christmas special last year. Ghosts.
Listen, I'm going to tip my hand, because everybody who follows us on social media knows I love Ghosts. I am really looking forward to going back and watching them all.
Excellent stuff. So, that's next time. But now, thank you from me and from the other one. Thank you very much for listening. You can join us on social media at BritcomPod, or look us up on Facebook, British Sitcom History Podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.